Good evening. It's now 7 p.m. and I'd like to start the meeting of the Housing Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I'd like to remind everyone present that this meeting is being recorded. So item 1, apologies for absence. I've received apologies from Councillor Worrell with Councillor Kent substituting, and Councillor Hebb has told me he'll be slightly late. Item 2, minutes of the previous meeting. I move that the minutes of the Housing Overview and Scrutiny Committee held on the 21st of November 2022 be approved as a correct record. Does any member have any comment on the minutes? Councillor Retta.
Yeah, Chair, I think a lot of, on the HMOs, a lot of it was missed off. I said quite a bit and it's not printed in there at all. So I know we can't print everything, but I would like it to have been a bit more. Councillor Hebb said things and I did things, they're just not in there. You know, it's not down there. So if we could just go back and have a peek at the minutes, I'd appreciate that.
I can pass that on to the clerk who took the minutes, but if you could be a bit more specific perhaps about the parts.
I will.
Thank you.
Right, okay, so we'll wait for the comments before we approve the minutes of the meeting. So, moving on, item 3, items of urgent business. I've agreed to an urgent item of business on the CO1 development, and an update report has been tabled. Can I ask officers to provide an update to members, please?
Thank you, Chair. I will take this item. Evelina Sargent, Director of Housing, Interim. So we've asked to update yourselves on that, and I believe you've got a copy of the briefing note on your desks. Back in March we took this to the committee. We wanted to start working on obviously development of this for the affordable housing that is so needed. We did the work at sort of initial stages, Reba stage 1, so sort of outline costs and outline design. We then since took the work to the next stage, more detailed design, proper cost estimate on what we were planning to design. We immediately started looking at the increasing costs. We've done 2 options, if it was going to be a 60 unit development or maybe a 80 units as we mentioned before, and we've got sort of 2 lots of costs within the briefing notes. What has happened since, obviously since March to now to December, there's been a significant increase in the, shall I carry on? Please? There's been a significant increase in the cost of borrowing, and there has been also increase in the cost of the actual construction. So with that we have reprofiled, and you can see the deficits that the scheme would run into. It is something that is affecting the whole country, not just us. The borrowing rates and the construction costs are sort of a feature of a lot of developments at the moment. So overall the costs would have taken us above what we would see as a deficit that any scheme could deliver. And you've got at paragraph 1.6 I mentioned that it would have cost us over £11 million to finance the sort of the borrowing on top of what we've already allowed for it. We have therefore decided that it's not financially viable, and the scheme at the moment is not going to progress as a housing development site. Thank you.
Thank you, Evelina. I mean, the disappointing, I think, is an understatement. Understanding increased interest rates, that is up and down the country. I wanted this just so that people are aware of from officers what the issue was, to make sure, because obviously this is quite a big chunk of the houses that we were looking to build over the next 5 years. So it's important that we look at that. I mean, I will be putting at the end of this in the works programme to ask for a report for either the next meeting or next meeting we can do of the impact of this and all planned development, because I think it's important for us to look at, not just take this in isolation, because we need to make sure we're developing as much as possible. The one thing that I would say in conversations I've had as chair with developments is, I know it's been discussed, but the confusion over the cost per unit of them is substantially higher than what they would cost to make in the private sector. And I think although residents deserve the best housing, it's actually we should be building to the building regs to make sure we can actually get these done, not building, because we need homes. So with that, is there anything in particular, members, because obviously this was meant as a briefing note and not as a sort of question and answer, but is there anything in particular people want, because I'd like to bring this to a future meeting to be discussed properly. Is everybody happy with that? I'll just question 3 for that. Okay, so what we'll do is if there is any questions, we can bring it to the report. Apologies for that. So thank you very much for that, Evelina. So moving forward, item 4, declarations of interest. Does anyone have any wish to declare any declaration of interest for this meeting? Thank you. So moving on to item 5, housing revenue account, rent setting and budget 2023-24. Can Mike Jones please present your report?
Thank you, Chair. I think I know everybody, but I'm Mike Jones, the Strategic Lead for Corporate Finance. So I'll do a kind of a brief run through this report because there's quite a few pages, and then I'll open it up to questions. So this is the annual HRA rent and budget setting report. Just to pick up on a couple of bits in the executive summary. So normally with this, the social regulator and the way the rents are formulated is CPI plus 1%. So that is historically the legislation which this follows. The government actually released a consultation on this, which was around the limitation of the rent increase that could be applied in light of the CPI rate. So at September 2022, which is the rate which is used for this, CPI was at 10.1%. So that plus a 1% would have meant rents could have increased by 11.1%. Following the old regulations. The result of the consultation from the government was it was capped at a 7% increase, which was the maximum that anybody was actually allowed to sort of suggest as the upper limit for this. So that's a kind of change to what normally happens with this. The reference to this about the HRA business plan, just again, that the HRA business plan is the 30-year financial objective and the strategy of the HRA. So it brings in all of the revenue streams, the expenditure streams over that 30-year period. So again, it's something which the HRA has to operate within the 30-year planning, so this isn't just an annual decision, it's the long-term implication of what the revenue means and the affordability for all the repairs, maintenance of all the HRA stock. So that's kind of within the executive summary. Within the body of the report, Table 1 effectively shows the position with the recommended 7% rent increase. After we've applied that and taken into account bad debt provisions, inflation costs, borrowing costs, energy and fuel, it effectively leaves a deficit in the HRA of 1.295 million. The HRA has to set a balanced budget, so its income has to meet its expenditure requirements. So Table 1 shows that with a 7% increase and the suggested increase in service charges, there is still a gap of 1.95 million. So that's laid out in a summary in Table 1, so we can effectively see those inflation and borrowing pressures as to what that actually does for next year in terms of the projections. Table 2, paragraph 2.6, sorry, under inflation, that just shows the level of inflation which have been included into the budget. So this is the current year budget and the expectation for inflation levels into next year. So substantially they are high, and importantly a lot of these run above the 7% rent increase as well. So it creates a deficit, and that's effectively where the deficit is borne out from. It's inflationary costs versus rent increases. So that's just the assumption around inflations which are in there. The borrowing and capital financing, the borrowing rate we put in at 4.5%. That's important because the HRA capital programme is effectively funded from the HRA revenue budget. So there's an element which is a fixed charge, which forms a lot of transforming home, but the rest of the borrowing has to be funded from effectively rent income. So they are both intrinsically linked. So the increase in interest rates in order to deliver the capital programme is causing a pressure within the revenue side as well. Table 2, page 23, that just gives an indication as to what these rent increases would look like on an average property, and I say that these are an average. So the property per dwelling is there, the number of properties we've got, and the average for 22-23, 91.56 would be the social rent. The uplift would, on average, £6.41 to get to £9.97, and you can see the impact it has on properties by individual dwellings. Affordable rents, so these are the properties which were effectively the new ones, or the properties which have been developed. They're on an affordable rent basis, which is different to the social rent basis, and exactly the same table is shown to show the impact on a property by bedroom size. Then paragraph 3.6, that really gets into the mitigation of the budget deficit. So the budget deficit, say after applying a 7% rent increase, would sit at 1.295 million. These are the recommendations or the options which we've got at the moment to look at mitigating part of that. So part of it is a 5% vacancy factor. I'll just stress that's not the same as a vacancy freeze. What we're kind of identifying there is there's a number of vacant posts currently within the HRA. It's really the time between somebody leaving a post and recruiting to it. So there's the natural kind of time between the advert, somebody giving notice and coming in. So a 5% on average of the staffing budget would feel realistic for natural staff turnover and some posts not being able to be filled. So again, it's not about freezing posts, it's more around just the natural vacancy and turnover of staff. The other one there, which does represent a genuine cut to the budget, or certainly something like, is around the assistive decorating programme, 634,000. It's one of the few things in the HRA repair and maintenance budget which isn't legally or statutory to do with testing and health and safety obligation. This is something which is discretionary. So for the moment, in light of the pressure, that is something we're suggesting is taken out for certainly for next year. And as the HRA develops in future years, we can certainly review that in future time. And option 3 is about, it's really what it's suggesting is it's an increase of service charges in line with inflation as opposed to a 7% increase in line with rents. Service charges aren't governed by the same rules as the rent increase, so they are meant to recover their full cost. Over the years, we've kind of got out of kilter with this, so we are not currently recovering the full amount for service charges, which we would be. That would represent an increase above 10.1%. So this really is part of that. It's about part of the mitigation, and it's 114,000 is the additional revenue which brings it in. So those three things combined would service the current deficit in the HRA budget. Service charges are explained in paragraph 3.7 and table 4. So table 4 is the increase which is represented at the 7%, and table 4A is the increase at 10.1%. So that's the current weekly charge, and the 23-24 weekly charge, as it would look, is shown in the last column of that table. Garage rents, we're proposing, say, an inflationary uplift with those. So the proposed charge would be £12.10 from £11.10. Travellers' site rents, which form part of this report, is in line with 4%. That's really the kind of just the overhead cost which we can apply to that, with the charges again there. Sheltered housing visitors' rooms, that's a very small amount, but it is important for this report because it needs ratification as a charge, so that's listed there. And table 5 brings in the capital programme. So this is what we'll call the capital programme on existing stock. So transforming homes is the transforming homes, as everybody knows, the kitchens, the bathrooms, the things that meet most of the stock requirements. And then below that are the specific items which we are proposing to do as capital works. So 23-24, the total budget for that 27 million. The carbon reduction, that brings in the works which have been part of the bid. So this really is kind of bringing a lot of these legal requirements forward a couple of years. So by doing that, we're able to bid for certain grants. So we're doing this early. This is going to become a legal requirement for all the HRAs at some point. So this is kind of quite forward thinking in trying to do this earlier on, maximise the available grants which are there, and also try and do this now as opposed to when there's a huge demand for these services in later years, which invariably will drive up the cost. So the borrowing cost, just on the bottom of that table, that 904,000, that is the requirement of doing that within the budget from the revenue side, and over the years you can see that builds up to a borrowing requirement of 3.3 million. So that's how that all comes together from the revenue side to the capital. And probably the next part is table 6, which is around reserves. So it's really just to sort of give an indication that in terms of reserves at the moment, the HRA does have a relatively healthy reserves position. So the general balance is 3.3 million. That will probably be the equivalent to the general funds 11 million to put it into those kind of contexts. The financial contingency reserve is there for mitigation and any unexpected expenditure in the year. And the HRA decant reserve is specifically there if we're looking at development of site regeneration. So the decant costs in any of those schemes in the forward can be quite expensive. So we've got a targeted amount of money for that. And we've got some element of reserve which will ring fence to support capital. So we would always use the capital reserve in advance of borrowing, but in the context they're relatively small in the overall context of the borrowing requirements. And that is effectively table 6, and table 7 just gives a bit more of a breakdown and transparency of how the HRA is made up. So we did bring a report to ONS a few months ago which was very similar to this. So it really sort of shows the point that in terms of the rent and income, it's just over £55 million. £27 million of that is financing and recharges. Operational service delivery is 15.4, and the repair and maintenance is 13.8. So they're the three key components of the HRA. And at the moment, this is showing the 1.294 deficit. So that figure at the bottom there needs to be 0 in order for us to set a balanced budget. And that is pretty much the report. So I'll sort of stop there and take any questions.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. Do members have any questions? Councillor Redsail.
Yeah, thank you for the report. I just see that garage rents have gone up another £1, but I haven't seen a lot of movement with looking after the garages. We've still got a lot of garages out there that are not done. We've got a lot of entry doors at the back of garages. I noticed today, going around my ward, some of them have been boarded up. You know, the door's been taken off and they've just boarded it up. So I'd like to know a bit more about that. If we're putting them up another £1, what are we giving them back? Because we've got a lot of garages in really disrepair. Some in Springfield Road have been done. They look quite nice, but there's nowhere else on the Blackshots estate where they've been done. It seems to have come to a halt at the moment. With the increase in... might be a silly question, but number of dwellings by bedroom, 0, is 238, and the affordable rents, number of dwellings by bedroom, 1. Can you just tell me what a 0 bedroom is?
It's effectively
please?
A bed sit.
That's
what it is. It's a bed sit. It's what it's
oh,
what
right.
It's shown as.
Okay. That's fine. The other one was just where you've got caretaking, bronze, silver and gold. Shouldn't we all be gold, really? Does bronze mean they're not doing much, or...?
It really boils down to if it's a resident, what we used to call in the old days, like a resident caretaker, so a caretaker that's dedicated to a particular block all the time, whereas some people have an element of caretaking, so particularly in sheltered, they would have an element of caretaking, but something like a high-rise block would have a dedicated caretaker on the stairway, the communal areas and all that. So it's really the gold is really I think the level of time which is spent there. So some areas have less, and some have a much more dedicated service, hence the cost. So that's the definition of it.
Sorry, thank you for that. I think most people would like to see a bit more done inside the high rise, you know, especially in my high rise. Don't think it's that great, you know, and I don't know how often the housing officers go out and have a look at the area, but I get a lot of complaints that they're not being looked after. So my only other question is, can we make sure this time that if we're putting up service charges, we make sure that we go out and find who actually pays a service and who's actually got a door entry and hasn't? Because it's happened in my ward. People got sent out charges and they had their own front door and no door entry. So you've got some flatted areas that have got their a door entry for everybody in the 3-storey high ones. In the 2-storey, they've got their own front door. So I just want to make sure, please, that you don't give them a bill when they don't warrant it. Thank you.
Councillor Lydiard.
Thanks, Chair. Going on from what Councillor Rebsell was saying, I found that many of our tenants don't really know what they are paying for in terms of service charges, and I think it would be a really sort of good move, a move in the right direction, if somehow they were brought in a bit like our tenant reps, and the charges are discussed and the service discussed to see whether the tenants actually feel they're getting good value for money. That's all. Thank you.
Evelina.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so Councillor Lydiard, service charges is at the heart of the sort of some of the service delivery, and we do look at it each time. There is definitely a little bit more information we can give out as to show to people, to point out as to what are the sort of services that are being provided and residents are paying for. We can absolutely sort of do a bit of sort of lessons, a bit of learning, I guess, session on that, and that will then hopefully invite challenges if people realise that they might be paying something that maybe they didn't realise. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions. The first is on the 30-year HRA business plan. We know that as a result of the current government intervention, that plan is subject to review. Can you just tell us what the timetable is for that review, and just give us some comfort that anything we're agreeing here has sufficient flexibility in it to take into consideration the outcome of any review? And the second question is, I've got to say that I am really disappointed that there's been no local consultation with tenants on these increases. We seem to be using the fig leaf that says government does national consultation, therefore we don't need to do it locally. I don't think that's good enough, and I'd just like an explanation of why anybody else thinks that's good enough.
Okay, yeah. So on the 30-year plan, yeah, this has been debated quite a few times, I think, nationally about what it means and kind of the validity of that. So what we've done recently, so the rent considerations are part of it. We've also started to bring in like the stock condition survey information into that as well, which is that long-term assessment of all of the HRA dwellings and the management costs and everything else coming forward. So really the two major points to that is the stock condition is the big one, and the rent. So the importance of the rent comes in, and if we go back to when the rent reduction was introduced, so when the rents were reduced, I mean, in terms of our business case alone, I mean, that took about £200 million out of that HRA business plan. So there's always that level of, and with this to a certain extent, the 7% increase is there, but the 11.1% would have met the inflationary cost. So this is kind of a rent reduction in another way. So we kind of model that through that as to what those scenarios will be. So the certainty around rents is absolute sort of the crucial to this, because any change cap or, if there was a reduction, it does totally change all of those aspirations and plans. And if we get into things like development and, large-scale capital programs, you've got to kind of commit at some point. And if your rent and your income streams are uncertain, it stops becoming a 30-year plan and it becomes a year-by-year thing, which is not in the interest of housing and particularly, the considerations we've got. So I'm not sure I've answered the question, but in terms of the validity of our business plan, we're happy that the inputs we've got in there are valid, have been checked. We'll wait to see what the requirements of government are going to be about this longer term and what they sort of hope to see, and sort of formulate this more, hopefully more clearly in some ways, and what the expectations will be. But I think in terms of the requirements, a lot of the capital works and the building works come down to like legislation and essential health and safety. So it's a lot of, with the tower blocks now and all of the increased kind of level of need. So we've got that in, and the carbon reduction is the other huge one as well. I mean, that is going to be, I think we kind of thought it's probably somewhere about £25,000 a property over the long term. If you look at what the implications will be, times that by 9,500 units, you're into hundreds of millions, even for an authority of our size. So again, we're trying to bring that in now to look at those grants, and if we can get in early, for want of a better phrase, we'll be much more ahead of the game with that. So it's all of those considerations as well, which kind of factor into it. Second question about the consultation.
Chair, if I might take the consultation one. It is a point well made. We have debated it internally whether we go to consultation or not, and we decided that the government has actually opened the consultation to absolutely everyone, tenants groups as well as landlords, as well as other bodies that obviously represent tenants or landlords. So there has been an open sort of way to feed into the government. Our sort of that there's very little discretion left really to landlords in the social sector at this moment in time to debate this. So we felt that our tenants would be sort of well served by that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hebb.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everyone. I just wanted to pick up on a point that Councillor Lydiard began exploring around the service charges. Can I just get some clarity before I ask my question? The service charges noted in Table 4A, are they divvied up by depending on what service people use, or is it one flat fee? And is there any form of progressiveness in that sort of system? I know it's not a tax quite clearly, but I just wonder if there was any sort of progressiveness in terms of the number of bedrooms, if you get my meaning.
Yeah. So in answer to the first question, yeah, it's only people that receive the service charge. So as you say, with door entry systems, so there's an assessment. Same with caretaking, all of those kind of things. It's only specifically. No, there isn't in terms of the size of the property, particularly something to do with, most of this is to do with caretaking, door entry system and lift maintenance. It doesn't differentiate between the size of the property. It's just the dwelling in effect. It's an interesting question, actually. I'm not sure if it ever has been looked at in terms of progressiveness, but it's certainly something I can take away. I think it is the dwelling in essence, though, unless it was something that was to do specifically with the size of the property. And I'm trying to think of an example. It would be quite difficult to do it. So I think it's dwelling based in effect is what we're working by.
Yeah, I had assumed as such, and I'm not saying whether it's a right or wrong thing to go and have a look at, but it's just a curious thing, because if you've got a number of different bedded properties within a development, as per se, you could in theory have, 2 earners compared to no earners, or 1 earner, and there's an element of progressiveness which doesn't sort of sit within that, which just kind of sort of shouted out at me. Thank you for that. Just looking at the where have we gone now? We now want to look at, apologies, section 2.2, which is page 21, just having a look around the actual rent increase itself. I mean, like you say, it's been capped, and I suppose the obvious question is if the council did push further and went the 11% or went under, what would that do for our obligations? Obviously, like you say, you've got the housing stock survey. There's a number of obligations that we've identified, whether because we want to or whether because we need to. And I think this report doesn't necessarily give us a flavour of what those obligations are. The other thing is, Mike, this is a bit more of a sort of a question perhaps for yourself and Andy Britton, around 7% at any time is hard for anyone, and especially in the current macroeconomic climate. So people are going to look at that and go, ouch. Have we engaged with Andy Britton's team to look at the whole single view of debt, citizens' advice and everything like that, just to make sure that we are primed and ready as an authority to be there to support signpost whatever we can for those that really are struggling to make ends meet?
I'll take the first part of that, and I think Evelyn can comment on the second part. So, yeah, in terms of what it means, so yeah, I totally understand that at 7%, it does still create a deficit of 1.295% to do with inflation. If that rent was reduced, so if it was 3%, for example, that generates £868,000. So that would be almost £2 million less. So that deficit of the 1.2 would be 3.295. Within that, and the recommendations we put forward as savings, and particularly the part around the repair and maintenance, that assisted decorating is really the only discretionary thing in that budget. So of that £13 odd million that we've got in there, it's not spent on, it's really that core kind of that contract stuff and the obligation stuff. So if the rent increase was lower, you'd be into fairly substantial cuts and genuine cuts, because of repair and maintenance, there wouldn't be many places to go with that, because you'd be into not meeting statutory obligations. So you're into that operational service delivery, and that's kind of front line. I mean, obviously, it would be mitigated, but you would be into taking pretty much a figure of round about £3.5 million out of a sort of a £15 million budget. So that would be the magnitude of it. It's difficult with this because this is driven by the inflation. The inflation factors are huge. So a lot of it is the contractual stuff, the repair and maintenance. So it's not just the contract inflation, it's the materials and the associated costs, and obviously the interest rate increase. So we've protected the capital programme there because that's probably the thing that benefits every tenant ultimately, the transforming homes and all of those works. So people do get a tangible benefit through the cycle of that progress. That would be the other one, which obviously would become the obvious one to take money out of this. So obviously in terms of borrowing, 3.2 million in borrowing would probably represent about 40 million pound of expenditure. So again, if you look down that programme, it would be a fairly sizable reduction in all of those. So the transforming home stuff, but everything else would kind of be put to the side. So yeah, it would be pretty drastic, genuine cuts and stopping services.
Thanks for that. That's really helpful. The reason why I pick up on that is because at the last committee, which I think was November, wasn't it? We obviously received a report from the Housing Ombudsman in terms of the aspirations, and we had a good conversation, didn't we, about that? And I'd never got a moment, a feel for one moment that anyone thought we should scrimp and save on that. And it does feel like Hobson's choice, but to sort of safeguard the ambitions that we've got for that sort of initiative. I assume that was the case, but I just wanted to double check, I suppose.
And I think the other point with that as well, it becomes a false economy, because if you spend in the capital and do the large scale improvements, if you don't, then you're constantly doing revenue and maintenance repairs rather than whole scale things. So it quickly becomes very much more expensive to not to do the big capital schemes as well.
And I will take the second point. It's actually not Andy's Britain's team. It's one of our own teams. So we do our own income collection within housing, and we have got quite a good actually record at the moment of income recovery, and we do that through our welfare benefits advisors and our officers that are trained in quite a number of things, one of which is, for example, fuel poverty. So we are actually quite on the front foot in terms of anyone getting into a potential arrear situation. We've got some of our processes are sort of run, I don't want to call it automated, but we've got sort of algorithms out there that predict who might actually go into arrears at some point, so people are not in arrears just yet, and we try and catch them and have a conversation with them. We send letters, we knock on doors. I myself followed a welfare advisor one day doing those sort of door knocks and just having conversations with people. So we think we are sort of well equipped to deal with residents that will find that difficult, because no doubt we know that people will find that difficult. The other thing that we look at is there is a proportion of our residents that are already in receipt of benefits, so we think that, you know, those most vulnerable ones will actually be protected by it, and that's probably one way of looking at it. But there will absolutely be those that will come to us. At the moment, we've started a campaign which we try and do, and I mean tweak every year, but we do it every year. There's sort of a focus on rent, so also to open up the sort of conversations where people think that they might struggle. So we think we equip, but we are absolutely keeping a watching brief on that.
Oops, sorry. Councillor Redfield.
Just picking up on Councillor Hebb said, you said about transforming homes. Has that actually finished now, transforming homes? Because I think, you know, at the lower rate of going up, I think people will appreciate what they've had done and will appreciate what you have to do, you know, to make that right. But I think people have got to see something happening for their money too. I just really wanted to know about the transforming homes, because it seems to have come to a stop now, although we're still doing odd ones and which we haven't finished. So
I could take that. No, it's still running. It's still in full swing, and there are areas that if you drive by, you'll see new roofs, new windows, and if you start knocking on doors, you'll see new bathrooms and new kitchens. So yeah, it's still very much running. At table 5, we listed us sort of 10, 11 million. For the foreseeable 5 year that we capture within this budget setting. So yeah, no, it's absolutely still going strong in areas. I think Tilbury recently have had quite a number of finished buildings there.
thanks, Evelina. I think it's that people will appreciate what they're getting for their money as long as they see it happening. You know, and we're seeing that we're looking after the properties. I know in Chadwell they're doing new roofs and things, so I think people will appreciate, you know, what's happening. And the problem is if it goes up too far, people just can't afford it and can't pay it. But thanks for that.
Thank you. Councillor Lydiard.
Thanks, Chair. Just wondered how many vacant posts do we carry that we're not actually going to replace?
I'll take that. So, as Mike was trying to explain, we're not trying not to replace posts. We're looking at the sort of the natural churn and maybe slowing down some of that. Naturally, once somebody leaves, before you get a new person in, there's always recruitment period, there's always notice periods, there's always that. So we're really just looking at that. Normally, we bring about sort of underspend on those budgets anyway. So what we're trying to say now is that we capture that underspend as a saving, as opposed to the sort of the thing that happens. And we will include an element of delay to that process of replacing another person. We don't want to be keeping vacant posts vacant for too long. I mean, we probably across the service we have one or two, but they've just been kept vacant for sort of other reasons, but not necessarily. We're not introducing not recruiting going forward.
Thank you. Councillor Churchman.
You know what I'm going to bring up is the flats, Terry Avenue. Now, we all know that we're a bit of an impasse with them because obviously we're looking for a viable development. But obviously, you've got to look at where we are now with them. They've got single glazed windows. It's prefabricated. They're 30 years out of date. there's not a lot you can do with them. And, you know, on that scale of it, you know, they're obviously upset at the moment of what they're actually paying because there's nothing really you can do in the way of transforming homes. I really would like you to look at that because obviously, as being a local councillor, I mean, and dealing with this now for nearly 3 years, you know, I think we need to be looking, you know, because at the moment, I mean, they're sending me their heating bills and, you know, it's a bit strong really that, you know, the flats are not in, I mean, they're 34 years over their due date, you know, out there, they're by sell-by date. I mean, giving them a 7% rise, you know, we're talking 7%. I know it's not, you know, maybe it's a lot to some people, but when you're looking with those flats particularly, you know, there is nothing you can do apart from patch them up. I mean, the single glazed windows, I mean, we had them put back in the early part of 2000. I remember when they all went in. And then from sort of 2010 upwards, they were promised double glazing, which would help because of the condensation. And I mean, at the moment, you know, as you know, I've asked for units, but some of them are pulling out 4 litres of water a day out of these units, which is, you know, in some senses, but that is, I would just want to bring that up, the fact that what can we do for them in the meantime while we're looking at, you know, looking at a viable development, because they, you know, they're really not happy with what they've got now in the way of transforming homes. And when you talked about it, I think I just needed to bring that up because obviously it's something I've been dealing with.
Thank you, Councillor Cheshman. And I think the many conversations we've had on it, exactly the same page. Those flats are something that we absolutely are putting a lot of our resources into redeveloping and really, you know, making that financial case stuck. Unfortunately, this is exactly what sort of similar situation to CO1, where what we were planning to do is now not necessarily financially viable, but we are working tirelessly to bring a viable sort of case, and so that we can actually redevelop those. On the day-to-day, obviously my colleague is here as well, who I know you deal with regularly as well. It is, we are here to support those residents as much as we can, and we will just carry on repairing for what we can and just work very, very hard in the background on getting a scheme delivered that is viable going forward.
So, Councillor Hebb.
Thank you. I was going to pick up on something that Councillor Lydiard said again, around on section or page 24, around this vacancy factor. How comfortable are you that will realise what you're expecting? Because it's one of 3 key tenets of the plan that feels a little bit out of your control, if I speak frankly. Sorry to put that like that, but it just feels like we're sort of hoping for vacancies and we won't pay the salaries for half a year or whatever. That's how it's come across.
So in terms of where we are at the moment, as Evelina said, for the current year, and this isn't, you know, trying not to actively recruit to things, we've got a variance of about 561,000, and it's across the whole range. It's not in one specific area. So we've got a bit in the business improvement team, a bit in the housing delivery team, a bit in the home ownership team. So, I mean, that basis of that saving was kind of based around what we've currently kind of seeing. So I say it's not about holding all them current posts vacant, but over the past 2 or 3 years, we've kind of seen that sort of 500,000 figure sort of come through, because when you get into it, the on-costs and the overtime and the pensions. So as long as the post isn't covered by agency staff, which is very rarely used in housing, then yeah, I think I'm fairly comfortable that it will materialise, unless there's a huge surge, you say, in uptake of things. But I think a few of these posts, even with the want of putting them out to advert, sometimes they just, you know, the nature of the posts, or they're very specific, just don't really attract people, you know, coming into it, or the viable candidates. So I'm fairly comfortable that it will be achievable.
Thank you. So, I mean, from what I've taken from what you've said and looking at the report, I think table 7 on page 31 kind of just really does highlight that you know this although we don't want to be putting rents up by 7%, I think we're looking at that we have to, and obviously we don't want to go above that. I think in terms of just a technical question on page 28 and table 5, it's got accumulative interest costs, and in year 25-26 it's only got 428. I'm guessing it's probably.
I've just seen that. Yeah, that's an error in the table there. So it would be it's the difference between the two. But I will get that corrected. But I just spotted that myself as I was talking through that. So yeah,
brilliant. Thank you. No, it's just I just thought, well, that'd be nice if they went down.
I'll get that.
But no, I think the echo of what we're hearing is that nobody wants to see cuts of service. So, and we really want that to keep going and maintain and get better. So, and to do that, we need to have it properly funded. So, with that, Councillor Kent.
Yeah, we've had questions so far. We haven't actually given views, have we?
Sorry, it was comments or questions. So if you've got a particular comment you'd wish to make.
Yeah, I've got some comments, and I'll start with the positive. I really welcome the carbon reduction programme and getting ahead of the curve on that. I think it's really important, and just fully welcome that. I understand the need to pause the assisted decoration scheme, but I would ask that we do all we can to bring that back as quickly as possible, because it's one of those schemes that has an impact well beyond housing. For some people, especially some of our more vulnerable older residents, it is just about the only time that somebody from the council, associated with the council, comes into the property and has a look and can see what's going on. And I think that it actually has a benefit that's way beyond housing. It's also the opportunity for somebody to get in, have a look at the property, see what kind of condition it's in, and I think it just pays dividends well beyond the impact that it has on the residents. So I would like to see that, you know, coming back as soon as we can. I understand how difficult this is. I really do, but I can't support a rent increase of 7% and service charge increases of 10.1%, garage increases of 10% in the current climate. I think that for too many of our tenants, with the cost of food inflation, of fuel inflation, of heating inflation, a likely council tax rise of above 5%, it could be the thing that tips them over the edge. So, you know, I don't think that we would be able to support that this evening. And, you know, the last one is, the other that we're asked to comment on is increasing traveller pitches, which is 4%. I would much rather have seen something much closer to 4% for everything across the board. And just one comment, if I can. Joy was asking about transforming homes. What would be really useful is if we could go back a few years and just have that schedule published to members on a rolling basis, so that everybody could see where was being done next, everybody could see what they were going to be getting in their wards in the next 2, 3, 4 years, and had the ability to explain it to residents.
Brilliant, thank you. And I do understand, I think everybody here understands that no one wants to put any more burden on anybody in a cost of living crisis. We really can't be asking people to pay more if we can avoid it. But I think, as I said, table 7, page 31, we've still got to find 1.3 million. And if we reduced it further, I don't know what a percentage works out as, but I know it highlights what the 7%, which is 3 million, was it, something like that? Well, I don't know where we'd find that from, and that would mean cuts. So it's the balance of, do we not reduce, or do we not increase and just cut things, or put the rent up to 7%? My view is that we have to put it up to 7%. And I know we'll go through that now, but I just can't see any other option. I do not want to have cuts, and I don't think anybody else wants to. Just really, really quickly before we go into the recommendations, because I'm just cautious of time. Councillor Hebb.
Sorry, just back on the point, because the point Councillor Kent raises is a real one. You know, there's no doubt about that. But I'll ask the question because I thought I got the answer, maybe I didn't. Our obligations that we've identified, whether it be through the housing ombudsman stuff or anything else, what are the impacts of not increasing rents and everything like that on our obligations, whether they're the obligations of desire or the obligations of statute? What is the impact?
Yeah, so in effect, we would have to find obviously that bigger deficit. We would have to then do a much more sort of, I think, detailed analysis of it. So, you know, as I said, repair and maintenance, we are meeting the obligations. Assisted decorating is the only kind of thing which is in there. So nothing. So everything else left in there is essential testing and health and safety. So effectively, legally, we probably couldn't take any money out of that at all, because then we would not meet the obligations and everything else. The only other areas really then sort of comes into the operational service delivery. I mean, there probably is a bit more discretion, but that would be the things that would generally affect people and that what the tenants would see in terms of area housing offices and you know, the kind of the formulation of the HRA, because it's managed well when the business plan is there, and it stacks up a lot better than a lot of other councils that are really in probably dire situation with repairs to repair and maintenance where they haven't done it. So that would be an impact on that, which again, not statutory or legal, but certainly would have a huge impact on the business plan and the development. And then the capital programme, so, you know, the transforming homes, you know, there is an obligation of that. And I think, you know, then the question, obviously, it's cyclical as well. So so it never ends, really. It's one of those fourth bridge type. As soon as you finish, you start again. And everything else in the capital programme there beyond that, you know, we're into the carbon stuff, you know, which we said, again, it's not legal yet, but it certainly will be. And when we're into the other elements of the capital programmes, they're all effectively essential or have a difference. There's no kind of nice to haves, really. They are, you know, pretty much essential works and you know, repair and maintenance. And again, it's a sort of thing where if it isn't done this way, it will just become a cash drain, you know, if we don't do the capital stuff on this. So I think that the short answer is quite severe in terms of what the impact would be on our obligations. We would be into points where, yeah, we would have a serious impact, or we would start falling behind, or the business plan, you know, wouldn't be maintained. So the implications of taking another, say, £1-2 million out of this would be that there would be an immediate impact and a long-term consequence that would probably ultimately cost a lot more money than what the short-term realisation would be.
I'm just cautious because we've got other stuff we want to try and get through. So I appreciate there's lots of points that we can raise on this, but I know Councillor Redstone wanted to come in, but if we can just leave it and then after that and after Councillor Redstone's comment and go to the recommendations, because I'm just cautious of getting through the other items. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. It's only a quick one. Evelina touched on it, and I don't think people mind paying a small amount more if they're seeing what they're getting for that amount. And as you said, most people, if they're on benefits, the very vulnerable won't really suffer. So I think it's good for me to know that, you know, and I think everybody, not just council tenants, but every person who's got a house has to pay for everything. And I think if they see those good things they are getting, you know, in that, I think even, you know, most people wouldn't mind. But it was just a quick point. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Listening to all what's said, I don't think I could back cuts to a service. So I think Table 7 really does spell it out. And obviously there's other tables to say what the pressure rises are and things like that. unless it can be identified where that would come from, whether we're going to stop transforming homes or doing other things. I think we have to proceed. So with that, I'll move to the recommendations on page 20, which are recommendations 1.1 to 1.5. Are members in agreement? Agreed. Are any members in disagreement?
I don't want to be pedantic, but they're not agree or disagree recommendations, are they? But they are inviting us to comment. So I think we've commented and the comments have been heard.
Well, the recommendations are that we've considered them, so you have to...
In the report that will go to Cabinet, they would note any comments made on the recommendation. So I will make sure that Councillor Kent's comments are in the minutes, and that will obviously go in the Cabinet report.
Okay, so with that, we have commented, so we shall move forward. Right, so item 6, update on voids management policy. Can Mohammed Saeed please present your report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. My name is Mohammed Shahidullah. I'm the Housing Repairs and Plan Maintenance Manager. Present the report to you today on the basis that the voids management policy was revised at the beginning of last year, and it has been drafted and implemented in terms of how we deliver our voids turnarounds, performance and costs, which are detailed within the report. It gives you an overview of some of the key and salient elements of that void management policy, which is supported by ancillary documents such as the Fit to Let standard, the recharge policy, and the processes that are detailed within. If I could just highlight some salient points from the report, as well as inviting your own comments back. Costs have been increasing. Won't be any surprise to you in terms of the works that we carry out within our void properties, particularly for the capital voids, so new kitchens, bathrooms, external fabric works and internal works. We've seen increasing costs around 20 to 23% over the year, but we've been managing to contain those costs with our contractors. We have had to increase some of the incremental component units costs, but we have continued to deliver on our voids turnaround times. The other element is our turnaround times for the standard voids has improved significantly. It was in excess of 30 days beginning of last year, and that comes down to under the target turnaround time of 25 days, 25.8 days. That specific stat is not contained within the report because of when this report was drafted. And the final element I'd like to bring to your attention is that we've had a new process in terms of monitoring and managing and tracking the works. We continue to have a strong input and robust input from our members from the Excellence Panel who come out and visit a number of the properties where we complete the works, and that will continue throughout the rest of this year. And on that basis, I'll invite your comments, please. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you for your report. Does any member wish to make a comment or question on this? Councillor Redser.
Thank you. Thanks, Alal, for that. Yeah, looking at on page 37 is 595 number of voids. Is that the voids now we have?
No, that was the figure for year 20. That was the number of voids that were done in the year 2020 to 21.
So
How many voids do we have now?
The last count, as of when the report was drafted, so the beginning of the financial year to October, it's 405. That's standard. Standard
that's
voids and capital voids.
405. We are losing the revenue on that, aren't we? Some are taking longer than others, and I know somebody that's been waiting 3 months to get into a house. So I think it's to me that is lost revenue. I just wonder why we're not doing a quicker turnaround on them than we are.
So I would just say that's the number of properties that have been void throughout the year. That's not the number that's being held at that point in time. So if you bear with me, what I'll do is I'll be able to find out the number of void properties there currently are. Okay. But that was throughout the year so far. So the majority of those will have been relet by now.
Sorry if I didn't make it clear to you, Councillor. So that's the churn. So over the period of a year, that's not in any one moment in time. That's the total accumulated figure we would have had. So the 595 figure were the total number of properties we turned around as void properties in that particular year, which is 2020-21. For this current year, we're up to 405. Of course, since this report was drafted, that's increased. But a lot of those 405 are back in circulation.
That 405 will have increased now. Yeah. As voids, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Churchman.
Hi, Mohammed. Yeah, you know, I read something and I just can't find it. I mean, I've read it so many times. Voids, when you've got a contract to go in there, I mean, I do know a little bit about voids because I've done it for 2 years. I used to work for 3 major big councils up in three major councils up in London. I did read it. They inspected when you've got a contract to go in there. Do we get them inspected completely before an handover?
Chair, thank you, Councillor Churchman. Yes, the process is that there's a pre-inspection visit. So my officers, I've got 4 officers who work in the voids team, will, once they've got the keys handed over and the key box is fitted on, they will inspect the property with the contractor, agree the scope of works, commission the works, agree any specialist works that are required. So if it's for a vulnerable resident that needs some special adaptations, then that has a slightly different scope, of course. So the works are then commissioned. We will invite members of the Excellence Panel to come and visit the property whilst it's in work, in progress. And then there's a post-inspection, post-completion inspection with tenancy officers, because they obviously need to then bring in potential tenants to view the property. So yes, is the short answer to your question.
Was the reason I asked that because on a few occasions I have had, where things have been missed, and some are so blatant. Can we have some assurity that we're going to sort of, look into more? You mentioned here lofts. Well, one particular I did, the loft was in a bit of a bad state, and that was left. But I mean, could we maybe look into maybe looking in a bit further in before we actually hand the keys over?
Chair, Councillor Chair, I'd be grateful for any of those details, and with any other members, if you could pass those details on to me. If you've got the properties, or if it's, I'd be more than happy for even attend those properties with yourselves to do that and just check over if anything's been missed from the scope, from the fit to let standard. That's what we'll be working to. But if there's any examples you can provide me, please do contact me and I'll look into it.
Thank you. I mean, I'm just going back on past tense. They're done now. I mean, obviously works I'll put through. Thank you.
Carol.
Yeah, just to let you know, we've not been doing it long. We've been doing it for the last 6-8 months. When a void is finished and the tenant is going in to sign it over, the Excellent Panel goes in with that tenant and we walk round with that tenant and they point out anything that they don't like with us, and then we take it back and we get it done.
Thank you. Does Councillor Ressa?
Yeah, just coming in on that's a really good thing to happen, but it doesn't always happen. And I think sometimes we rely on too much on the resident saying that it's finished. The resident isn't perhaps that knowledgeable on what has been done within the property. So I think we're relying on them to accept that property as it is, and then we get things go wrong afterwards. So I think we've got to not just rely on the resident coming in and saying this is not right, because sometimes they don't always know. So I think that we perhaps a bit more stringent on when we do hand a property over, making sure that it's got all the right things. You know, we've had a lot go on where people have handed over the property, or it might be, I think it happens more in not actually brand new property, but a property that is come up and they're moving from one property to another, and we will say to that person that you've got to accept it, you won't get offered anything else. And I think that frightens some residents to think, if I don't accept this property, I won't get anything else. So I think we've got to stop saying that to residents. You know, it's got to be right or not at all. You know, if we can just pick up on that, because that does happen. I've had that a few times on some of my residents where they're getting a bigger house, or they're getting, and I'm sorry, you if you don't accept it, you don't get anything else. So it sort of frightens them into, we've got to accept it or else. So if we can just pick up on that, I appreciate that.
We'd be happy to take it away that there are certain instances where we make direct offers and they may actually come across like that, because it's you kind of get one normally. So yes, we'll pick that up. We also measure the satisfaction with the new homes. So you've got in your packet, page 40, the sort of the satisfaction measures for new tenants. So we really pay attention to it as well, what people are saying. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lydiard.
Thanks, Chair. I just wondered how many long-term voids do we have, and the cost. Do you have any long-term voids that will never be let for various reasons? They're falling down, or they're constantly flooding, and are the costs of loss of rent included in this?
Chair, we do have a number of properties that are posing quite significant structural issues in terms of the works we have to do there. There may be subsidence issues, and thereby, and there may be party wall issues. So we've got a formal consultation process to go with neighbouring properties. We need to get structural engineers out. Those do prolong. I wouldn't say those are excessive in numbers. A handful, maybe a dozen at any one time, that have significant structural issues and external issues. We're working with our Transforming Homes partners, so Waits, to come and do full surveys, come up with a full scope. Obviously, we then have to check the costs and make sure that it's viable. And so we do have that process in place. There have been a number of properties that, even when we've completed works, that have proven, again, these are small numbers, but have proven difficult to let for various reasons. And I'd have to get feedback from my tenancy colleagues as to why residents go. It may be because they're ground floor, or they're not happy about security arrangements. There's a number of reasons why they've found them quite difficult to let. But again, I'll have to get my tenancy colleagues to confirm some of those elements.
And are they included in the loss of revenue?
Yes, they are.
Thank you. Councillor Hebb.
Thank you. In no particular order, the fire safety obligations that are now sort of beholden on us in an obvious context after 2017, that it says an average price per void, so presumably that's what is the differential?
That can. Sorry. Chair, thank you. The differential can, in terms of percentage-wise, can increase the cost by up to 15% in terms of having the latest fire safety, smoke detection, the level D1 systems. We've had to do some of them retrospectively, so where we've delivered the property up to the fit to let standard. Residents, we wanted our residents to move in and say we will come back and to finish the works in terms of some of the safety standards. We tried to get that all incorporated within our turnaround, our 28-day turnaround time. sometimes not always possible, but particularly where we try to be quite flexible around the residents. A number of residents in temporary accommodation have family issues, schooling issues. We want our residents into their home as soon as possible. And if there are some outstanding scopes, then we will be happy working with those residents to say, look, if you're happy for us to come back whilst you're in situ, because we want you in your new home, we'll come back and do those works. In terms of cost-wise, like I say, that has been increased over a number of years. Fire safety doors and new fire detection systems, internal wiring has increased, like I say, around 15 to 17%. We have managed to absorb, the contractors have been able to absorb some of those costs in terms with their buying power from the market. Obviously, we know MERS they operate our build base, so they can sort of absorb some of their the bulk buying and economies that they can offer to us. Over the past few years, up until this financial year, previous inflationary increases were around 2 to 3% in the market that we awarded to the contractor. This year that has gone up significantly. That won't surprise you. But still we managed to contain that to single-digit figures, to around 6 to 7%. That will go up. I'm just alerting you now next year. Hope that answers your question, Councillor.
Yeah, very much so. Did you do we wait for properties to become void properties before making those upgrades, or are we doing it on a sequential basis for currently inhabited properties?
Combination of both. Because I oversee the planned maintenance, so in terms of all our compliance works, so those works are carried out with in situ properties. Where we've got void properties, we try to do as much of the statutory compliance works whilst they're voids. So yes, the short answer is that.
Brilliant, thank you. In the appendices, it talks about damp and mould. I just wanted to get an assurance that that's fully aligned to the discussions we had 2 months ago in terms of the criteria within the report. There's nothing that's been missed there. It's all, that's a tick, is it?
Well, I brought that report to you through my director here. So yes, hopefully the two will be joined up.
Good answer. Just wanted to double check. Reasons for voids. So this is comprehensive. It tells us what's going on, the framework around it, and all that sort of stuff. Unless I'm missing something, what I can't see is the sort of the pre-toll or the top 3 reasons or whatever. I suppose what the local authority's action plan is to drive down the causation of voids in the first place, to be up so long.
I can take that, although looking at Ryan, because he was just pulling reports on current voids, but it's no, it's not there. It's more of it's natural. So people are moving on. People are transferring to different properties. There are deaths where there is then end of tenancy, and there is some abandonment as well of tenancy. So they're kind of natural life events that happen.
The only reason I ask is because last month, again, sorry, I think it might have even been your report, we talked about the 2-bed properties that would be perfect for things. I'm just thinking if, I don't know, is there like a sequence that is probably, it sounds like is being joined up. I just wondered if there was an opportunity there, but it sounds as though you're over it. It's very good. And last couple of things. The cost of, so when a tenant does something to their property of their own volition, if I read correctly, the incoming tenant, quite rightly, isn't charged for sort of dilapidated infrastructure to be replaced. I get that. Are we able to cost recover any of that from the prior tenant, if that makes sense?
That's the purpose of the recharge policy, which is out there. Yeah. No surprise to any of us here, our residents will make changes to the properties that we then have to strip back out. That is at no cost to the incoming tenant. That would be just grossly unfair, of course, if we know. But we do try to recharge wherever possible. Now, of course, that then does have some discretion where if it costs £80, £100, just pluck a figure out, the amount of times we will have to write to that resident, chase that resident to get that money back, well, it's going to cost us more to recover that money. It's money. So we do try to. I don't know what our recovery rates are in terms of the recharges. I'm afraid I don't have that data, but we do exercise a degree of pragmatism and common sense, I think.
It'd just be curious, just some headlines like you've done at the last meeting, and I think the point that yourself made, Carol, around the the handover conversation. I think that's where that's really important, to make sure that no prior tenant is sort of accused of not, or being chased for something that might, to be fair, not actually be something that's their issue. And just one last one. I'm sure I read somewhere in here that we're about 5% more costly than others. I can't remember if I've missed something, but what do we think's driving that? Why is Thurrock 5% higher, do you think?
You're right, it was in the table there, Councillor Head. Sorry, mate. Yeah, it is. We're roughly, our costs have increased around 28%, as I mentioned. Other boroughs around 23%, 24%. So, yeah, we are slightly higher. It may be a statistical matter, where at what point in time we looked at those indices. It may be that we're compared. I went to a national body to get some benchmark data, so Housemark, as I mentioned. It may be down to the regional councils that were part of that basket of 20-plus councils that we looked at. They may have been in some of the home county councils. So costs possibly were lower there. Their volumes and numbers may be less, perhaps, as well. And they may not have included some of the legislative upgrades that we've done in our voids process. They may have treated that separately. They may have gone back as part of a separate work stream. And though for those upgrades, so like we mentioned, the fire doors, loft insulation, the electrical upgrades, we've included that within our basket. Some of those other boroughs may not have included that within their basket. So it's not quite like for like.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So with that, in line with the recommendations, does any member have any thing they'd like to comment on in regards to the individual policies? No? Okay, thank you very much. So, and thank you for your report. Thank you. So, item 7 now, Beaconsfield Place on Calcutta Road, lessons learned. Ryan Farmer, can you please present your report? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm Ryan Farmer, I'm the Housing Strategy Manager, and I will be presenting to you this Lessons Learned report regarding Beaconsfield Place, Calcutta Road. So this development was completed earlier last year, now we're in the new year, in Tilbury. It was designed to be a happy scheme, providing accommodation, 35 homes for people aged over 55 on Calcutta Road in Tilbury. It, as a project, was designed collaboratively with staff from a range of services, as well as other colleagues across the council who have particular experience and expertise in knowing what should be in a development of this type. What this report sets out is some of the lessons which have been learned following the handover completion and tenants moving into their new homes at Beaconsfield Place. The first lettings were completed on the 7th of March 2022, so residents are now starting to head towards their first anniversary within their new homes. Very, very proud, very delighted to say that the scheme was nominated for a number of awards regionally and nationally. The Best Older People's Housing Development, Meeting Housing Needs category at the Essex Housing Awards, and it did win one of the awards at the Essex Housing Awards last year as well. So it's good that our schemes are getting this level of recognition. But as we do with all of our new build handovers, although this is the first report that's come forward to committee, we've pulled together a group to look at how the process went, what we can learn, what we can take away, and make sure we feed into any and all future developments to make sure that some of the things that maybe didn't run as smoothly or some of the things that did, we can either stop doing or carry on doing, depending. The first thing to flag, and it isn't a situation that will come up very often, it is that first point about the designation of the scheme. And by designation, we mean who the scheme is intended for at the design phase. The Calcutta Road development was always designed to be specifically for people aged 55 and over. It was always designed to be a happy scheme. Hopefully you will remember, or you will be aware that a decision was made late in 2019 to decommission the Alexandra Court Sheltered Housing Complex, which was just down the road from the Beaconsfield Place development. Because of that decision, there was an opportunity to look to help residents move from Alexandra Court, which was no longer fit for purpose, to a new build scheme which was designed with older people's housing needs in mind. A decision was made to progress with that, but that was after the fact of design and after construction started. And had Beaconsfield been designed as a sheltered housing scheme specifically, different things could have been done. So what this point is really pointing us towards is making sure that when we have a commitment to designing a scheme in a particular way, wherever reasonably possible and for as long as reasonably possible, we really want to aim to stick to that. But it's also given us another opportunity to think about, can we be flexible in the way a scheme is designed to think about maybe a future use down the line if the need for that accommodation needs to be different. So, for example, if we know that we're going to develop a sheltered housing complex, but in the future it might be possible to convert into something else. It's something to think about. It's not a must by any means, but it gives us more flexibility in the future about how we might want to manage our stock and protect our assets for the future. That being said, I really want to be clear and say that there is no suggestion that building is not fit for residents, it's not fit for purpose. We've had new tenant feedback surveys carried out so people can tell us how they feel about living there in their homes. 3/4 of those who responded to the question about quality of their home said that they were very satisfied or fairly satisfied. So people are giving us feedback that they're happy where they live in their homes and they're happy with the quality of it. So I do want to just put that out there. It's not to say it's not fit for purpose at all. It's just making sure that we remain committed as far as possible to what we intend the scheme to be. I'll go through a couple of the other points and then happily take any questions you've got. Some of the operational factors around communal fixtures and fittings. I think we have aspirations not to design homes and provide homes which are blank boxes and uninspiring, something that has a bit of character. And from my understanding at Beaconsfield Place, there are some particular light fittings in communal areas which aim to make the space far more attractive and welcoming. But from a maintenance perspective, it's just something for us to be mindful of to make sure that we can appropriately keep them clean and well maintained. Waste and waste collection. Before I come on to this point, I'll say that these are lessons not only for the housing service or the housing department, but they're lessons for the council as the provider. There have been examples where developments have had issues with getting waste collection started, and there has been engagement to make sure that we avoid that in the future. But it was something that we know happened, and it's right that we flag it and share it with you as committee members. It's not fair to say that didn't happen when it has. So that's absolutely something that we would like to make sure across the organisation we don't experience again, and residents moving into their new homes don't experience again. The point on caretaking, fantastic feedback from residents who are satisfied with the service they receive there, and we've received some really good general feedback from residents who've said really complimentary things about the caretakers on the site and how they've been supportive in the sheltered housing complex. It doesn't get picked up very well in a survey about percentages. The only point this is making sure that we think about space for caretakers in the future. We, as a standard, will always provide space for materials to be kept safely, access to water. If there's a development in a place where there aren't other caretaking facilities nearby, restrooms, just making sure they're considered in the design phase. Again, that's not a particular challenge with Beaconsfield Place. It's not to say there's a failure there, but just as a lesson to make sure we always consider in the future. Probably the factor that was the most prevalent one for us to be mindful of was issues around antisocial behaviour around the Beaconsfield Place site. The first point I've put in there, and again I share it with you because it's what residents have told us, is that 75% of people report that they feel safe in their home. So although there is a proportion that didn't say they do, the vast majority do feel safe in their home and now have been in their homes for a period of time, and there's been a detailed action plan to address some of the things that maybe didn't run so smoothly. There's some things for us to think about in the future about the timing of handovers, not that we can delay handover or get properties handed over at a different time from the delivery partner, but maybe some of the management factors or mitigations we need to put in place, making sure that there is enough support, there's enough deterrence or whatever strategies need to be in place for a development depending on when it's being handed over or where it's being handed over. And we'll make sure that we have a new build group that meets to discuss all our new build, making sure that that is a specific agenda item on every conversation so that we preempt this and we don't have that experience happen again. The last point here is the experience of moving to a new home. This development did take a little bit longer to be handed over than anticipated. It was being constructed in the midst of the pandemic, and that caused all sorts of delays for all sorts of things, for all sorts of reasons. But it did mean that residents that were moving were waiting longer and longer to move to their new home. We were very, very keen and eager to get people to move as soon as they possibly could do to get into their new home. And again, where we had people moving from Alexandra to Beaconsfield, it was a very tight geographic area, a lot of the same resources needed all at the same time, and we experienced some challenges with that. So in the future, think about how we might phase and support people to move differently. Everyone had a phenomenal amount of support that was moved from Alexandria. They were helped with removal costs, with packing and everything like that, but maybe on the day it didn't run as smoothly as we'd like it to do. So thinking about how we can phase that differently in the future. A point that gets raised at committee sometimes about who does move into our new homes. I just wanted to point out the table that is in the report at 8.3, just to show you who it is that's moved into these homes, if they were council tenants before or not, or if this is their first council tenancy, and the areas they've moved from, really. I think it's important that we do reflect on that point, and we see that our approach does work for Thurrock residents. And I'll draw the line there. Happy to take any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Redsell.
Yeah, it's a good report, Ryan. Thank you. It's nice to get that good feedback. Just a bit concerned on the last little bit you said about the area they've moved from. Does that mean everybody that goes into there is in Thurrock?
So, of the 35 new homes, the previous address for 33 were in Thurrock. There were 2 addresses outside of Thurrock. From looking at those numbers, if I can remember, they were people that Thurrock had a duty towards anyway. So the address might have been outside of Thurrock, but Thurrock had an obligation to those people. So it could be previously looked after children, for example, or it could be a family that was placed in temporary accommodation. I can't remember the circumstances, but they were people Thurrock had an obligation towards and were considered, I guess, Thurrock residents in a form.
So, looked after children, does that mean they've got children in there at 55 and over?
That was just an example of the type of category.
So I can't remember
the specifics.
Just picking up on that, Beaconsfield played offered affordable rents. I hate that word, affordable, because it's only affordable if you can afford it. It's like even new properties, it's only affordable if you can. I just want to pick up on that. So it's got affordable rents, so if you could just give me a bit of that. The 55 and over, does that mean that stays in place for is there a length of time that stays in place? Because I know I've got flats, 2-storey flats in my area that used to be for elderly people and people who couldn't perhaps get up the stairs and were a bit handicapped, so they got the bottom floor. But it's now not like that, and you may get one old person left in that block with other people that it doesn't fit, So my worry is that that 55 is how long that stays in place.
So would that be St Sed's in your ward potentially? No, that's okay. Oh, okay. So now this scheme has been designated as sheltered housing. It remains sheltered housing until a decision is made for it not to be. It might be decommissioned. It might be that it's permanently decanted. We're not planning on knocking Beaconsfield down, but the example I'll point you towards is Alexandra Court, where it's a sheltered housing complex, but we're decommissioning it with plans for the future. So it will remain like that until a decision is made otherwise. It's important, again, to flag this point. At Beaconsfield Place, there are a number of duplex flats, so 2-floor flats. It was designed as an over 55s housing scheme, and letting those types of properties under that general needs over 55s is very, very different to a 2-bedroom, 2-floor flat in a sheltered housing scheme. Those properties have been let differently because under our allocations policy and the housing register, the demand wasn't there. It wasn't going to be possible for us to let those properties. And this is part of the reason why when we have an intention for a scheme from design phase, we need to make sure we stick to it going forward so we can let properties that are designed for the right people in mind. Apart from those duplex flats, the rest of the scheme is sheltered housing flats. Those duplex properties we've had to make as effective use as possible, so that means we've had to let those ones slightly differently. But they've all been done quite sensitively and with a great deal of consultation with the sheltered housing team specifically.
Yeah, I just didn't want to see aesthetically as it looks for over 55s in 30 years' time. Are we going to give that back to, you know, another wave of people? You want it to stay as over 55s because you'll have that sort of transformation of people will get older and they'll sort of perhaps leave their home or something happens to them. But you just want that carry on to carry. So I've seen a great change in my ward, you know, and it doesn't always work. So I'm just glad you're saying that it's going to stay as 55 and over, which is really good. Thank you, Ryan. Cheers.
Carol, did you want to come out?
Yeah. Since I put that report in, they have been back to me, the tenants, and they're quite happy now because the antisocial team actually knocked on their doors and asked them what was wrong. And they went with a council representative, so they're quite happy now. And it's not Alexandra Court, it was Alexandra Road.
Yeah, it was always one of those things when I was writing the report. Alexandra Road and Dunlop Road, and you had the communal hall, Alexandra Hall in the middle. So, yeah, apologies for using the wrong terminology there.
Brilliant, thank you. Councillor Lydiard.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for your report, Ryan. Just wanted to say I inspected some of the flats and I thought they're absolutely amazing. A little bit expensive, but those people who can afford them went in there. Bit of antisocial with the kids trying to get into the communal areas, but on the whole, I thought they were absolutely amazing. Well done.
Thank you. Councillor Hebb.
Thank you. Good report. Good idea. I like it a lot. Page 86, 3.2. It's very curious to read the first sentence of that section. How does that happen?
Could I ask you to be more specific about the element that you're asking? How can something happen?
Yeah, certainly. How does it happen that a change of designation happens what would appear to be so easily?
So I wouldn't necessarily say it was easily. There were strategic reasons for it to happen. One of those was the Alexandra Court complex. At the time that Beaconsfield Place was designed, that wasn't necessarily an intention. I can't say about the timing, but there was a report carried out on all of the sheltered housing complexes about their accessibility. And Alexandra Court, Alexandra Road and Dunlop Road, the condition of those properties and the accessibility aspirations we had weren't marrying up. So it could have been at that point a decision was made. We also do consider the longevity of stock. And when we provide a new property, hoping that it remains in our stock for a long time, whether a decision was made there to help protect properties from right to buy, for example. I can't necessarily talk about all the decisions made. It wasn't the decision by me, but it certainly did help us with the decommissioning of Alexandra. The other thing I would say is that an interim assistant director of housing is still an assistant director of housing, and business does need to continue. It was an appropriate decision made at an appropriate level, so that's all I could say on those points.
Thank you, that's really helpful. I then move on to, I made a note against section 3.4. I suppose my question is, not question, statement, because we've been asked for questions as such, are we? But this authority's ability to deliver projects, as it says on the tin, is not great, is it? Let's be honest. I'm not reflecting out on the housing department. I'm reflecting out on the corporate entity. Let's just say it as it is. I suppose my question is one thing I really like this because it's really, having an inward look, it's brilliant. I suppose my question is there an opportunity for the wider corporate side of this organisation to have a look at how the heck it does projects? Because tonight we've heard of a project which was committed 6 to 9 months ago, which, by the way, was the baseline for why a decision was given to make this building that we're sitting in now, that's now not going ahead. We've got this conversation happening. We had conversations last time about black shots, and I could go on and on and on. What multi-departmental approach are we going to take? And I'm not, perhaps you need to go away and talk to your colleagues, and I'm sorry for putting this on you, but we do need to underscore that. This authority has a problem with the ability to deliver its projects that it commits to. And I would just ask if you could please, if you haven't already, have that conversation with your peer group, because we need to do something very different.
I will take it as a positive, Councillor Habb, and we'll take it away and see how we can share those lessons, because that obviously was delivered as a complex project, as a big project, and obviously delivered well. So yes, thank you.
Thank you, and it sounds as though Councillor Liddy, I was very happy with the quality of the outcome, and I obviously look to him as the ward member. But there is just that corporate thing, just like what you was going to earlier. It was an appropriate decision made at the appropriate time. So, yeah, anyway.
Thank you. Councillor Kent.
Thanks, Chair. I wasn't going to speak in this, but Shane has just prompted me to. So I think there are two things for me. I kind of welcome the redesignation of the new build. I think that one of the things that residents absolutely hate is seeing something built along the road from them when they're being decanted from Alexandra, and then they don't get the opportunity to get in there. So if changing the tenure just made it easier for those people to get in there, then I think it was the right thing to do. But Shane is absolutely right. I really welcome this report. I love the idea of just let's have a look back and see what went well, what didn't go well, and look at lessons learned. And I'd like to just go a little bit further, and I'd like to add a further recommendation tonight that we feed in and suggest that this is something that's picked up across the authority when it comes to any major project or any new build.
I'll second that. You're up with that.
I'll take that away, Councillor Kent, and present it DB as a way to go.
Thank you. That's why I think, bearing in mind the scale of this, and that's why I wanted this report so badly to come on, because I speak to residents about the issues daily, and I'll go into them shortly. But I think a lessons learned sort of thing. I know when we had discussions on the pre-brief, and we said that the lessons learned side of things, actually you do it internally, but we should be getting that, I think, across the board, and making sure that them lessons that get learned don't keep getting forgotten and made again, because I think there's a lot of repetition with errors, and I think we need to nip that in the bud. So I'm just going to bring in Councillor Redstone.
Just some positive, nothing really to do with this report, but if you think of Chadwell, what you did in Chadwell, really positive, and the feedback from that was so good. You want more than that, on that part. So if you can do that well, you can do it in other places. So I think you've got to work from that. Chadwell was so good and had good positive vibes from everybody, really. Whoever was going past it, was saying how good it was. So it's that. Just wanted to put some positive vibes in, because some things we do well as an authority, and then we go on to not do so well. So I think take it from that. Yeah, this is a good report, Ryan, and I'll knock you whatever, if it's wrong, it's wrong. But I think, this is good. But take the positive that we do some things right. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, thank you, Chair. So I'll certainly make sure that colleagues in the housing development are receiving your feedback. And just on a personal note, I think I've been in the homes at Halmer Court when they were being built. I was in the homes at Claudian Way when they were being built. I was in Beaconsfield Place, and you just feel proud that we get to provide homes like that. And it's great that as members you feel the same. So thank you for the feedback.
Just so, Chair, it's nice that officers are going out, seeing Thurrock. Yeah.
Yeah, I second that one. I think we're all we want to see a better Thurrock, and I think things like this and project like this, it'd be nice to happen more and more, and especially looking round the complex as it was when we moved the residents out of that one before. Walking around that site, I'm glad we condemned Alexandra Court Road. Well, not condemn it, but there is lots of properties there condemned actually from my understanding. But walking around there was boilers and all sorts going wrong. So I'm glad we got the residents out of there and moved them around. So happy with that. And feedback from residents has been good at some points, and I will raise some issues actually, because I think as much as the lessons learned, you must look at the negatives as well as the positives. So I've got residents that tell me things such as like snagging in their property is still not done, and they've been in the property for 9 months. I've had comments of residents that have moved out because they didn't feel safe because it took so long to fix. And I appreciate that we've got there now, from my understanding from what the report's saying. But actually, I don't know if you've got off the top of your head how many residents have moved out since they've moved in because they didn't feel safe.
I don't have those in the top of my head, but I can find that out, and I'm sure I could find out the reasons for as well.
Oh, thank you for that. Yes, it's just a source of frustration because it's such a fantastic project in what it should have delivered. And I sat in a police meeting in April with residents, and lots of them did. I don't know when this probably in the report, but the satisfaction survey was done, but 75% feeling safe, 25% didn't. That's a quarter. So I know that just makes me worried. I work in schools, and if 25% of the kids didn't feel safe, we have a major issue. So we shouldn't treat anybody any differently. So I don't. Looking around, and it may be wrong, but there's no electric car points there, is there?
I'm not sure about electric car charging. I know that there is storage and charging for mobility scooters, but not.
Yeah, it's just because it's 55. They're working age people. They're not all disabled. They're not all not working. They're not all retired. And actually, they might like a electric car. Can't charge it. Massive issue. And as we're looking at these things, actually, that should be on there now as we move forward. That's becoming a bigger thing of all of our new builds. I mean, electric charge points should be in there. And I mean, it's more of a practical thing with this one. Things such as like windows do not open more than 10 centimetres, which in the summer is awful. Residents were advised at the time to just leave a door open. Well, that's not very good for security, especially when you've got antisocial behaviour and kids running around. So that is I don't know if that's, well, I've been told that's still outstanding, and I believe it's an issue with that there's a key or something that they could be given to open their doors. Not doors, sorry, their windows. But can we not give them that? I mean, surely we can't expect them to just crack their windows open. I think that really should be looked at and given to them. And one thing that really does baffle me is energy. Whether it's the council building energy company, there's still points, meters there that aren't associated to the right flats. And with a cost of living rise, we don't know who's paying what's bill. And that can't happen anyway. That shouldn't be an issue. And to my understanding, that's still not sorted out. So I don't know whether that's in the process of being sorted out or not, or where we're at with that. But I'm just wary that some people could be paying more or less, and I don't want to see that happening. You should pay for what you're using. And the garage gates as well. They've broken again, from my understanding, and they keep being broken and left open. And anybody could drive in there and park, and you've got a train station down the road. It's just, if we're doing it for sheltered housing, it needs to do it right, not just leave it. I mean, great design on the outside, and I'm all for light fixtures and nice things working, but moving forwards, putting fancy lighting in is great if you can't repair it or it goes wrong and it takes ages to fix or is very expensive. So, in a lessons learned, all of these things into the mix, we've got to look at them. If things like snagging isn't being done, electric things aren't being done, we can't leave people like that. This is their first anniversary, some of them, and they're still experiencing issues. So I didn't want to end on a negativity. It was it is a great project, but I'm going to have to on that one because it's still not done. And my one question at the end is this been signed off? Are we handed it over? Have we, in terms of the building and payments and all that side of things? Because if we've got this long list of snagging, is that finalised now? Or if so, can we not sign it off at this point?
Well, it would be subject to any defect certification within. So at the end of the 12-month period, where we need to validate all the warranties for the new build elements, so there will be an inspection at the end of the 12-month period where any outstanding snags, defects, work scopes, so repairs, will all have to be completed before it's signed over, and then it becomes a formal sort of ownership. So we then absorb all the liabilities and the maintenance regimes and warranties for the building. So that should be scheduled, if it's 9 months now, so we should be coming up to that in the next couple of months. So they should be booking that appointment in now.
Oh, I thought it was a year. People have been in there for their anniversary. Is it not a year now, or is it?
No. The first handovers were in. The first tenancy started in March 22, so we're about 9 months in at the moment.
Right. Okay. No, but some of the question was more if there is these issues, and this is a thing of moving forward as well, not signing off things unless it's correct, because what we don't want to be doing is get lumbered with costs for the taxpayer or residents to be able to fix these issues once we've signed it. So can we get assurances that, as long as committee are agreement that if there is outstanding things that we don't sign it off until it's done, can we get that agreement, please?
Yeah, no, this is a standard practice, absolutely, yeah. End of defects, sign off, yeah.
It might well be the standard, but I'm making sure, because as this is a lessons learnt document and it's moving forward, I know it should go without saying, but if such work's still left over, and with the anniversary coming up, because I heard 12 months anniversary and it was 9 months, so I was just making sure, because obviously if it's signing off soon, then that would have to be delayed because of the outstanding works. But no, thank you for that. As long as we move that and we don't sign anything off without it being right for our residents. So that's it. Is there any other member that wants to note or comment on this? No. Brilliant, thank you. So we shall move on now to item 8, homeless update 2022. I've got it down as. Oh, it's Evelina. Can you please present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. So I'm presenting the report as Ben is unwell and unable to attend, and we don't want to do the link whilst he's unwell. So this is an annual update on homelessness. Last year, if you remember, we focused on everyone in, because that was sort of the topic following the pandemic. This year is more of a sort of general overview of the work of the service. And as you can see straight away, the homelessness presentations have been growing year on year. So this is essentially anyone approaching the council with a sort of a potential homelessness situation where we're being asked to help with the placement. And you can see in the table that it's been steadily growing. And the last actually few weeks, it's getting more and more busy in that area, unfortunately. So we're definitely seeing more approaches. We have had a number of sort of reasons to it. We've had court dealing with backlogs of possession cases. As we will all remember, possession proceedings were halted during the pandemic and sometime after to help residents actually stay in their homes. But once the courts have opened, there was still a bit of a backlog, but now this is all cleared. So we're seeing a lot more presentations from that source. At this moment in time, currently, we're also seeing presentations from people whose landlords put their rents up in the private sector. So we are now experiencing this as I speak to you today. The sort of the second big item is the impact on temporary accommodation, and again, as you can see, This is the graph, the first graph on page 85. We got to a really good point in January where we really did well with sort of moving people out of TA, and then it's right back up again, where we are seeing quite a number of approaches and people actually being put in temporary accommodation. We have made a bit of a dent in the sort of in the sort of the where people are actually going and what the TA, how we provide it. So the page 95, the bottom of the page, you can see how the nightly pay, we've really worked very hard to reduce it. The nightly pay is the most expensive form of temporary accommodation, is the one where we purchase sort of properties from landlords out there, and we have grown our own furnished let portfolio of TA properties. This is the one where we can actually control the cost a lot more and have a greater sort of a feeling of the security of the home for the time being for the resident as well. So we're very sort of happy with those numbers and where they're going. And if we go over the page, on page number 95, this is something that is very close to Councillor Spielman's heart. This is making sure that we bring residents, if we've got to have them in temporary accommodation, that they remain in Thurrock. And that really is quite a big challenge for us. At the time of writing, we had 16 external placements, and 6 of them were made for safety reasons, or that the residents wanted to be in a different location other than Thurrock, but 10 still remained at that time outside of Thurrock. So, but as you can see, where we got it at the peak, we have made really quite astonishing sort of achievements in that area, and this is still a very much hard target for us to get everyone in Thurrock who can and wants to be in Thurrock. Rough sleeping is probably just the last thing in terms of the sort of the cohorts of people. When Ben presented this report to you last year, we said that we would really like to carry on with the principle of everyone in, where people are rough sleeping, and sort of show a lot more discretion and exercise the discretion to actually house people. We get separate funding from government for that, because obviously this is a national issue with big ambitions to eradicate rough sleeping altogether. So we also tell you about the sort of the moves and the permanent moves and the sort of with assistance and as well as housing sort of first placement. So again, that's working really well for us. But as you can see, sort of where we placed people, which is the table on page 97, you can sort of see that, you know, somewhere TA placements, we then moved people onto PRS from TA and all that. SWEP is the severe weather emergency protocol that is triggered by the government every now and then, and that last yellow line is essentially that cold spell we had in December, where we really housed 11 rough sleepers, sort of, you know, within hours into sort of accommodation. We were trying to be also very creative with it, because it's very difficult to actually find 11 spaces on the day or on the night. And I'm really, really proud of my officers. They worked tirelessly. It started on a Friday pretty much, and sort of the whole weekend. So really, really good work there. And you know, just a little reminder, we've got a little video, and anyone that sees or knows of anyone sleeping rough, StreetLink is really the place to refer it. We then get it picked up through the outreach team, and we go out and help support that resident. There's absolutely no need for anyone to be sleeping rough in Thurrock. We're really well kind of prepared and set up to pick up anyone and help. And the last thing is the human learning systems. It's a frame of principles that we are working to, and you will probably hear a little bit more about that at the next sort of report, when Peter talks about the sort of tenancy management and all that. This really is all about, from this viewpoint, collaboration between the various sort of teams, various partners, trying to make sure that we actually look at vulnerable adults that come through the sort of the door to the council, and we house them and provide support so that we can turn it into sustainable tenancies and actually get that sort of security of a sort of safe home for those that approach us. And then we've done a lot of work with various hospital teams to ensure that once the duty to refer is raised by a hospital, in particular now, as we knew that, those sort of health systems were under immense pressure, and now obviously those risks have materialised. This has really allowed us to work very closely so we can pick up any individual that is, poised to potentially be faced with homelessness from the hospital and sort of wrap around the support into one of our properties, or within sort of, even if it's private sector, then it's still within with our support. So that has been really working quite well. It's just a little bit of a kind of mention there about costs. I think when Mike and I look at those figures, we really are worried because obviously the TA budgets absorbed quite a lot of savings in this financial year, and obviously this was at the steady flow, but as the figures shot up in terms of the approaches and TA placements, we've really put together a figure and looked at it as a sort of back to growth area, because that's just what we're seeing every day, and we just have got to respond to it because that's our duty as local authority. So unless there are any sort of burning questions, I'm here to take them. Thank you.
Councillor Redser.
Sorry. Are we still giving priority to service personnel on that, Elena?
Absolutely, that's right. And in the refresh of the allocations policy that we took to you a few months back, as it kicks in April, we're making that even more clear and prominent.
Have we got any service personnel that are on the streets at the moment?
Not to my knowledge. I was looking, as an aside, at some of the census data that's come out, so we have a better understanding of service personnel that live in Thurrock. So now that we have a more recent marker, we can kind of make sure that we have an understanding about who might come forward. But to the best of my knowledge, no, not at the moment.
Can I just ask, if someone is being thrown out of a property because the landlord wants to sell it, is there any redress that they can come to the council, or is it just a no-go, they have to go private?
Quite a lot of those approaches are from landlords that are looking to sell. So there is, every situation is looked at, its own merit, and we sort of test the legal rights of any such household. But absolutely, a lot of those new approaches is from landlords that are looking to sell.
Councillor Kent.
I got to say welcome the report. I don't welcome the report at all, but it's thorough, and I'm grateful for that, and I'm grateful for the work that's being done. But that increase in homeless applications of just over 20% in 2 years is shocking, and it's not one of these problems that's going to go away anytime soon or get any better anytime soon. I'd just like some comfort that in the current climate there is going to be sufficient resource to make sure that we help everybody that needs help.
I couldn't agree more, Councillor Kent. We are also very concerned about that. But yes, we decided over 18 months ago now, almost 24 months probably, to grow our own portfolio of temporary accommodation. So we've got control over it, and we can manage it better. And as I mentioned, we put aside the growth area for the next financial year, because this is real people that we need to house and provide. We provide a number of incentives, even if we help to find private accommodation in the private sector. We provide financial incentives to people to actually move in. We contribute to his deposit, pay for deposit, and all of these things, they come at a cost. But we're absolutely seeing that this is the area. and unfortunately, this is a national picture. Actually, every single local authority with housing, homelessness sort of duties is seeing exactly the same thing.
Can I just follow that up? I'm kind of grateful for that. I'd like not tonight, but at some point, some information on temporary accommodation and the kind of length of stays that people are having, because you may not be kind of on the street homeless. You may have somewhere to rest your head, but if you're in temporary accommodation, then to my mind you're still homeless. You still don't have a home. So I'd like to see some figures around that as well.
That's fine. We can do that. We can follow it up after the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hebb.
Thank you. Just looking at the chart on page 97, the one thing I don't think it accounts for is those that might have been reported via StreetLink that might have refused help. I don't know how much that plagues our borough. I mean, over in Stamford Le Hope, there is a gentleman, has been a gentleman for some time, and you know, on the snowy, when the snow come down on Sunday, we went over and saw him and offered him a coffee. Can we make a phone call? Can we, you know, literally messaging Councillor Spillman, like, he just wouldn't, very polite, but just wouldn't have help. And it's heartbreaking because you want to help, but you can't help someone that, you know, might. I suppose my question is does this account for people? Does this data account for people that might have refused their help? And I suppose, is there any way that they can confidentially approach us if they'd rather not just a random stranger? Because they have no idea who we are. But there were so many acts of kindness that evening and through that particular season in Stamford Home. And it won't just be in Stamford, it'll be across the borough. I just wonder how much of a problem that is for us as a borough.
So we know of a few individuals. It's probably a handful that you know, appear every now and then and are not willing to be housed. Various offers have been made, and you know, to an extent we've got to respect that. Yeah. It's somebody's choice, and you know, we work with them as much as we can. These people are known to us. They're known to the soup kitchen down the road that gets set up. So it's that we satisfy to a degree that there is support, and if they need to, very often. I mean, I went on a sort of day with our you know, a trio, the sort of rough sleeper coordinator, the tenancy sustainment officer, and one other, and we spoke to a gentleman who's absolutely, you know, happy staying where he is and not willing to move, and it's the neighbours around him that actually give him hot meals on a regular basis, and it's almost the kind of the work, you know, they live next to one another. So we do have those. They're not necessarily accounted in that data because this is more about placement, but what we found interesting when the sweat thing happened and the temperatures really got to the point that we have seen people that we didn't actually know about. So we would normally report 6 to 8 people, you know, at the worst peak. We where on many days we go to 1 or 2 that we know of are sleeping. You will note that we actually placed 11 people because we've had again a handful of people that just came out of nowhere. We did not know about them, but they were sleeping rough. So there is a group that we know of but are not willing to move in. But there is now, we also know a group that we didn't know about. So yeah, but yeah, excellent acts of kindness on the day, amazing over the weekend, amazing stories. So really well done to the community.
Thank you, and clearly it's very heartfelt for you. You only have to look at a lot of you when we're talking about this. You can see that it means as much to you as it does to everybody. So, you know, good effort all round. And like you say, we have to respect personal choice as much as you want to. Please let us help if people, you know, I think we've said what we need to on that. Just one other thing. Across the border over in Basildon, they've sort of recently pioneered some approaches with a group called Hill Group. I don't know nearly anything about it, but I just wondered, are the council looking at certain ideas like that? Apparently they sort of provide funding and stuff like that. I know you've already got some initiatives underway. I just wondered if you'd heard of it or whether you'd thought to look at it, and if not, it might be worth a look.
maybe not me personally, but perhaps Ben and the team, when they're kind of closer to the detail, perhaps they have, but if not, I'll take that away and find out. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Does any other member wish to make comment on the reports? No. Thank you very much. So, and yeah, thank you for the report. I know, you know, in an ideal world, no one would be homeless, but I think by the look of this, you're doing the best we can. So thank you. So, item 9, the work programme. Does any member or officer wish to comment or put anything forward for the work programme? I think we've got one more meeting this year. Councillor Redhill.
Yeah, Chair, and Evelyn will sort of give me enough look. I think we need to have garages. I don't mean I want a report with an officer here, but something down on paper just to see how it's going and where we are at the moment. Please. Yeah, I don't mind that, just so we know what's going on, because people are seeing work being done and then it's not carried on and they're wondering why it's been left. Thank you.
Brilliant. No, I think that's a briefing note will be good for that one. I mean, the only thing I'm cautious of how much time is left. I mean, it should have enough, but in line with the CO1, just a report on the impact of all the outside issues that we've got on the rest of our programme, because we really need to have a look at that. I'm not sure that will be something we will know because of everything else by March, but if we could, then that would be good, or if not, the next available meeting after that. So, is anything else? No? Oh, Evelyn.
So I think at the bottom of page 102, we've got items for 23-24. What I was suggesting, we normally bring the development update anyway. So in terms of, if we don't label it CO1 development update, but we just bring you development update on all of the schemes. And you're absolutely right, March is going to be too early for us for that. But it's definitely something that we're looking into as we speak. But, you know, fairly early in the new municipal year, if we bring a development update, and then we can sort of tell you where we are.
Oh, that'd be brilliant, thank you. Right, it's not in the room, but if there's nothing else, then I would say that concludes the business of the meeting this evening, and I declare the meeting closed at 9:07 p.m. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.